forefathers weren't the Pilgrims. We didn't land on Plymouth Rock. The rock was landed on us.
My grandmother was a full-blooded Iroquois.
I know all of that, Mama.
They don't know this. I am alive because of the blood of a people who never scraped or begged or apologized for what they were. They asked only one thing of this world: to be allowed to be. And I learned through the blood of this people that black isn't beautiful. It isn't ugly. It isn't kinky hair. It isn't straight hair. Black is just black. It broke my heart when you changed your name. I gave you my grandmother's name, a woman who bore 9 children and educated them all. Who held off 6 white men with a shotgun when they tried to drag one of her sons off to jail for not knowing his place. And you had to reach into an African dictionary to find a name that would make you proud.
It comes as a great shock around the age of 5 or 6 or 7 to discover that the flag to which you have pledged allegiance, along with everybody else, has not pledged allegiance to you. It comes as a great shock to discover that Gary Cooper killing off the Indians when you were rooting for Gary Cooper, that the Indians were you.
On the other hand, we are the only true inheritors of the place called America.
That's right. That's right. It belongs to us.
Because we are still outside of it.
It belongs to us, and there's nobody can do anything about that.
And we will get it. If we continue to move. I think it's a guilt.
In ways that one can't quite see yet. We already have it. That's one of the reasons for the panic.
We have to effect it.
Yes.
And we have to know it, and we have to make sure that everybody else...
We have to change it.
Our destiny is tied up in the destiny of America. Before the Pilgrim Fathers landed at Plymouth, we were here. Before Jefferson etched across the pages of history the majestic words of the Declaration of Independence, we were here. Before the beautiful words of the Star-Spangled Banner were written, we were here.
Mr. Muhammad teaches us that Negro is a term that was applied to us during slavery by the slave master. And right today, it's a term that is used only to point out the descendant of slaves. It's never used for black people, period. Africans can come to this country. They aren't called Negroes. And if they are called Negroes, they resent it. So if Negro meant black, as we've been taught, it would be a term that would be applicable to or applicable to everyone. But he says that it is something that means a slave, or something who is, it means something that has been left out of society, politically, economically, educationally, and otherwise.
You don't think of it as an anthropological term?
Definitely. It's not an anthropological term, it's a slave term. And it was a term that was invented in America and was used by the slave makers, slave traders, and slave masters, and attached to the property or the chattel or merchandise that our people represented in that particular day.
And by the way, we're not black. How about that? We're not black. We're Indian. Yeah. We're Native American. Yeah. How many of y'all grandmothers got Indian in your family?
Yeah, I'm Indian.
Wait a second, but what happened to the Indians? We black. Show me black on the planet. Why you stop recording?
He knows the fucking shit.
Why you sound crazy? Nah, because you think I sound crazy.
No, you don't sound like that. I'm still recording. You're talking true. You're talking true.
We're not black. Race was made up.
You're talking true.
Race was made up.
Yeah, with the brown eyes.
Show me black on the planet. Show me black. Everybody else, they European, they Australian, they Chinese, they Japanese. Show me black on the planet. We marginalized as entertainers.
Crazy because he's black.
Nick, what you care about crazy?
Hello, happy Educational Friday. The end of that video always makes me laugh. It's crazy because he's black. What you know about crazy? Hello, happy Educational Friday, y'all. Come on in. Get the likes up on the video. We got a good one today. I know I've spoken to you guys before in the past about the KKK and its influence on the quote unquote Great Migration. And I wanted to kind of touch on that tonight because a lot of people don't realize that the KKK literally was a government agency used to force Black people off their lands. Literally, that's what they were. That's why they didn't go to jail. That's why they were the sheriffs. That's why they were the judges. That's why they were the police. You get it? That's why they held all the prominent positions, because the government allowed these people to do what they did because they hired them to do so. They were no difference of an agent than Martin Luther King. Mm-hmm. Sorry, y'all. So I wanted to touch on that today. So y'all come on in, get the likes up on the video. Shout out to everybody in the building. And let's go jump right on in it. It don't even make sense to start all that craziness, right? So I want to start with the KKK, right? Now, we all know about the KKK. Well, our children may not know much about them, but we definitely know about the KKK. The KKK is an organization, obviously, that came about, I want to say in the late 1800s. We'll get into that here. And basically, people think it was just this hate organization of white folks who just hated Black people. And on the surface, if you want to sum it up, sure. But people don't understand the backstory about this group. So now the KKK, if you understand who they are and why they existed, then you understand why we are where we are today. Now, the civil rights movement didn't only happen with Martin Luther King in the 60s. It actually was going on throughout the whole early 1900s, late 1800s, okay? And this civil rights movement thing, it involved the NAACP, it involved all of those things that was happening throughout time. Freedom fighters, all that shit. Not freedom fighters, freedom riders, yeah. Because I think the freedom fighters were the military dudes. So I think it was the freedom riders. Please don't quote me. But anyway, it was a lot of stuff going on. And simultaneously, other things are happening. And some of those other things, while we're fighting for quote unquote civil rights, there's also other facets of things that's happening that's shaping the future. And one of those facets were the KKK. Now, the KKK came about. Most people looked at it with some poor white people or some, politically powerful people who just want to get up under a robe and be racist on the low. And that is the gist of it, but it's deeper than that. These people were paid to go inside of Black communities and run the people off of their lands, okay? That's what they did. When they burned them crosses in front of those churches, blowing up, it was all to get you away from the land. That was the whole purpose. Now, yeah, they had other supporting purposes of the KKK as well. But when you talk about what was the biggest impact the KKK had, more than hanging and lynching our people, definitely the economic pull or the economic thievery that happened to Black Americans is definitely largely contributed to the Ku Klux Klan. And we're going to get right on into it. So before we get into that, I want to read this super chat really quickly so we can jump on in. Shout out to Alice Jones for the super chat. Also, for sure, as usual, making it rain. I make it rain. I make it rain. I make it rain on them hoes. I make it rain. I make it rain on them hoes. That was so awkward, but thank you so much. I really appreciate you, Alice. And she says, Alice Jane, I'm sorry. She says, just paying tithes. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I appreciate each and every person in the building. So let's get into why we're here, right? I don't know why Rumble does this. No, Twitch. Let me say this too. I be trying to do Twitch. I never have an issue with my titles on Twitch until I either put in Negro or something like KKK. So because I put those words in the title, Twitch won't let me stream. It'll tell me I need to change the title. And at this point, like the last 2-3 videos where I use the terms Negro or KKK, I'm not going to worry about it. It's just Twitch don't deserve it. Let's move on. But anyways, so the Ku Klux Klan or the KKK are the enforcers. They are the arm. They are like the muscle behind pushing people off their land. Now, if y'all understand what happened in history, what you know about history is once the white folks come over here, originally it was the 13 colonies, right? But the 13 colonies did not include the South. That means the Carolinas, Georgia, Florida, Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, Texas, Oklahoma, none of the West Coast. It only included that little East Coast piece, you know, Virginia, Vermont, you know, all them places up in the corner up there, right? But once the French went to war with Haiti and needed money to fund the war that not only they had with Haiti, but also needed money to fund a war that they were fighting back in Europe as well, they decided it's time to just come up off this land, okay? So what they did was basically sold the land for pennies on the dollar. They were desperate. They was getting popped in the head by the Haitians, and they was over there in Europe getting popped in the head. And they couldn't afford both, and they also couldn't afford both on top of having this brand new land that Napoleon never even stepped on, allegedly, if the character is even real. But that's neither here nor there. So long story short, once the U.S. expansion happened and the 13 colonies expanded, and expanded all the way to the South, and then obviously so on and so forth to the West Coast, you got to keep in mind, those lands were heavily occupied by indigenous copper-colored people. That is Indians, Injuns, whatever you want, Aboriginals, whatever you want to call them, okay? FBAs is what I call them today. They were already heavily populated. As a matter of fact, there were more populations, according to the census back then. There were more, and remember, the census isn't always accurate because it's really on a volunteer basis or who they can get. But either way, it still showed that the South had a huge, heavy black population. Now, remember, we spoke about Ellis Island. While all of this is happening, so you got French just sold the Louisiana Purchase. So now you doing the U.S. expansion from the 13 colonies to the South all the way to the West Coast. Now that's happening. That's one thing. On top of that, French fighting a war between Haiti and Europe. That's happening. Then on top of that, they got people already on this land. It's almost like somebody bought an acre of land and it came with cows. There's people on this land, but it's too many. Now, wars were taking place like crazy. We heard about the Seminole Wars and all this, and it was more Indian wars than that. But the point I'm making is, when they started expanding to that area, that's when they had to take hold of the people to get hold of the land. And I believe, and from what I've studied and researched, that the KKK was one of those agencies used to help shuffle some people around. Now, the history likes to call this thing a quote unquote great migration, but anybody who knows anything about anybody who's gone through the Great Migration know it was everything but great. As a matter of fact, in the movie Sinners, when the little dude saw Smoke or Stack, I don't remember which one, and he was like, bro, y'all up there in Chicago, like, I bet it's nice, big cities, big buildings, I bet it's so much better up there. What did he say? He said, Jim Crow the same up there, only thing different is his buildings, that's all, or something to the nature. What people found on this Great Migration, when they went to the South, to the North, it was just as bad. It just looked different. Racism was still the same, still having all type of race riots, all type of insurrections. It was crazy. Then the jobs that they thought they were getting for the ones who volunteered, a lot of them couldn't even get their jobs. It was crazy. And like I said, anybody who's up that way, y'all know y'all parents know better than you. You can talk to your parents and they could tell you better than I could. You know what I'm saying? I can only tell you from history, from studying. Okay. So here comes the KKK. Now, most people, like I said earlier, think it's just some poor whites who just don't have nothing else to do but hate niggas. But it's deeper than that. This group was responsible for millions of Black Americans, aka FBA, aka indigenous, and aka Aboriginal, aka copper color Indian people in those lands. They were largely responsible. If I spoke about this early on the Morning Jokes, when you look at Oscarville, where Lake Lanier is, it was the KKK that came in and ran all those Black people out of there. Okay, so what happened was the government came in and asked those Black people to leave, or whatever, and the Black people refused. They had built a thriving town, just like Tulsa. Tulsa wasn't the only one. And as soon as the folks refused to move, they sent in the KKK. And the ones who didn't leave after the KKK, they buried them under the lake right now. Facts. Okay, I got a video on that on the channel. Go check it out with Lake Lanier. It's a whole video on Oscarville and Lake Lanier on the channel. I did a really good deep dive into it. Go check it out. So they were moving strategically. These KKK clans and all that stuff, they're coming up, popping up strategically where there are large areas and groups of Black Americans. So Indiana, Indianapolis, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Texas, where there's large groups, Oklahoma, where there's large groups of Black Americans strategically, but coincidentally, there's this huge influx of KKKs coming up. Now, like I said, you can look at the surface and think it's just some racist white folks, but I'll say coincidentally, strategically, we lost a lot of land in the process, okay? So now let's get into a little bit on the KKK really quickly. And then I'm going to connect the KKK and how it connects to the Great Migration. And I got a video to show y'all, okay? Let me go scroll down. All right, it says the emergence of the Maryland white, never and recently revitalized chapters have led efforts to gain a stronger foothold in mainstream American society. Historically, this pattern aligns with a familiar Klan tactic, heightened visibility during periods of actual or perceived socio-political strife. What does that mean? So that means whenever the people were ready to do an uproar or uprising for any type of social, political, or economic, any type of issue, here come the KKK. That's what that means. So wherever there were uprisings, and this is what's worse on Black Americans, because we were getting attacked on two fronts. We were getting attacked by the KKK, and we didn't even realize that we were also getting attacked by the NAACP. We didn't even know it. We did not even know it. Now, some of us knew it. But the large majority of us did not know it. So we were getting attacked on two fronts. It goes on to say, it says, this year saw a persistent focus on online activism marked by a gradual shift from such niche platforms such as Stormfront, whatever, to go large social networks, including Facebook and X, formerly Twitter. The emergence of the Maryland White Knights and the Sacred White Knights underscores this reshuffling. The Maryland White Knights appear to have formed from the remnants of the old Glory Knights, while the Sacred White Knights seem to have risen from the dissolution of the Loyal White Knights. Now, they're talking about in current times. They're talking about a resurgence of KKK. That means there's something in the milk. There's something coming up. Meanwhile, the KKK the KKK have resurfaced and the Silent Knights are actually recruiting. Another key connection has been between the United Klan Nation and the Aryan Freedom Network, evidenced through shared events and mutual promotion. Okay, so right now they're already gearing up to come back, allegedly, according to this article. But let me say this: a lot of socio-political things are happening in society. They just tried to get us with the doggone with the boy who got beat up in the car by the police. You see what I'm saying? This is what they do. Let me see if this is it. Hold on. Let's go here. America First. The KKK influence on immigration policy in the 1920s. Now, this is only one facet of one of the things that the KKK was doing, because I told you the Great Migration. And matter of fact, before I go there, I don't want to jump ahead. Let's go over here. I went to Wiki. We all know, take it with a grain of salt. But according to this, when you talk about the Great Migration in the time period, it says the Great Migration, sometimes known as the Great Northern or Northward Migration, Black Migration, was the movement of 6 million African Americans out of rural southern United States to urban Northeast, Midwest, and West between 1910 and 1970. Now, let me say this: 6 million Black Americans, 6 million. All of these people didn't leave behind land. Some people decided that they just wanted to pick up their stuff and go, and they left the land back home. Like my family, we still got the land back in Mississippi, okay? But 6 million people shifted from the south to the north. Do you know how much land that was probably vacated or abandoned in their terms, with this 6 million people going from the South to the North. One thing about Philadelphia, shout out to my black people in Philly. Philadelphia was a scam back in those days. So what they were doing with people from land that had land in the South, and don't get me to line on which state because I don't remember directly, but what they were doing back then was they were telling Black Americans, okay, come up to Philadelphia, give us your deeds. We'll hold your deeds, or you can switch the deeds for this little to low cost rent in Philly. They didn't realize a lot of them were moving into what I call concentration camps, but ghettos or hoods. And they were literally, some of them were tricked and fooled into giving over a whole bunch of land to go up to Philly. Some of them was taken. Some of it was stolen. You know what I'm saying? But Philly was notorious for stealing Black Americans coming from the South land. Okay? Now, mind you, all these facets are happening around the Great Migration. You got the KKK popping off. You got Jim Crow popping off. You got all this stuff going on with the government. You're coming off of slavery. Everything is crazy. Politically, everything is crazy. Black Americans had it rough, but we were still somehow maintaining. So a little bit more on this Great Migration. It says, it was substantially caused by poor economic and social conditions. Look at how Wiki lying. It was substantially caused by poor economic and social conditions due to the prevalent racial segregation and discrimination in the southern states where Jim Crow laws were upheld. Now, let me show you how I know for a fact Wiki is lying. So Wikipedia is trying to say that the reason the Great Migration happened is because people were poor. People were strapped for cash. They needed money. Jim Crow was popping. They couldn't get jobs. So the Black people wanted to go up north. I'm giving you guys a lesson with how the internet is not to be trusted, okay? So Wikipedia is saying that Black people was poor and say it's so much more money upstate, let me go up there. That's not the case. They're saying that that's largely in part why people left. They were forced. Most of those people were forced, okay? I always look at the Great Migration like the Trail of Tears, because in my opinion, the Trail of Tears was the first Great Migration. You know what I'm saying? When large masses, groups of people are forced from one place to the next, okay? So Wiki is trying to say that it's because people were poor. That's not what it was, because listen, poor in the South is not the same as poor up north. And all us who Black in America, we know, even if you ain't from up north, you know poor in the South just mean you might not have money to go blow, but you straight. So being poor in the South, as long as you can feed yourself and you got a roof over your head, everybody was poor for real. I mean, you know what I mean? By that logic, it wasn't that type of time. You see what I'm saying? But that's what Wiki is trying to say. And then it goes on to say, in particular, continued lynchings. Now that's true. Motivated a portion of the migrants as African Americans searched for social reprieve. It says the historic change brought by the migration was amplified because of the migrants. It says, for the most part, moved to the then largest cities in the United States: New York City, Chicago, Detroit, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Philadelphia, Cleveland, and Washington, D.C. At a time when the cities had a central cultural, social, political, and economic influence over the United States, their African Americans established culturally influential communities of their own. I told you everything is happening simultaneously at this time. What's happening also is the industrial era. So now we're getting a whole bunch of factories popping up. And guess where the factories popping up at for the large most parts? Up in the Northeast. So guess what? If we got factories, what do we need to go with the factories? Workers. If we need workers, then how are we going to get them? Oh, we already forcing them up, taking their land. Pull an advertisement up, do that. You see what I'm saying? So it was so much happening. It was like, that's how you know we such a resilient group of people, because the way in which we were being attacked from all angles and we still was able to thrive should have been like proof to these people, like we not really to be played with. It says, according to Isabel Wilkerson, despite the losses they felt leaving their homes in the South, and despite the barriers which the migrants faced in their new homes, the migration was an act of individual and collective agency, which changed the course of American history, a Declaration of Independence, which was written by their actions. See how they like to romanticize this thing. There was nothing romantic about the Great Migration. There was nothing romantic about having to pick up every single thing that you own and go move somewhere. Family in tow. There's nothing you can say that makes me feel like people volunteered to pick up everything that they have. Like it was just so bad, or they was just so backed up in these corners that they just, you know what I mean? It just, especially when y'all been on the land for centuries, it just doesn't make sense. But you know, that's how they like to romanticize stuff. Now, as it pertains to, let me make sure I got the right article up. Yeah. So I want to share this article with you as well. It says some histories differentiate between a first migration, which is 1916 and 1940, and a second migration, which is the 1940 to 1970. Both waves of relocation featured Black Americans leaving the South for other regions of the country, typically in search of better paid work and less hostile environments. The Great Migration saw about 1.6 million people move from mostly rural areas in the South to northern industrial cities from 1910 to 1930. Approximately 1.3 million Black Southerners moved north and west, and several different migrant streams that generally depended on the transportation available to them. African Americans from the East Coast typically went to Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and New York. New York City's Black population more than doubled during those decades, from 152,000 to 328,000. So what they're saying is the Black population doubled, but y'all also have to understand what's happening during this time too. Who else is flooding New York during this time? I know somebody in here from New York, and we only counting Black people. So you got a whole bunch of Black people from the South coming up north between 1910 and 1907. Who else is coming in to New York? They still there to this day. I just want to see if somebody gonna get it. Okay, but which ones? You close. Which ones? A lot of Caribbeans are coming in. Caribbeans. A lot of your Haitians, Jamaicans, your Dominicans, these are all people that they're not telling you they're counting into this Black number. Okay. Now, I don't think we'll ever really know the true number of people that were coming in from the islands during that time. But what I do know is this is all around the time during that what they called it, the Harlem Renaissance and all that stuff. They were pouring in the droves Caribbean people too. So now New York, you got the natives of New York. That's the Black people who were born and raised there or in the areas or around the local places. And then you got the people coming in from the South. And then you got a crap ton of Caribbeans. And I'm only naming them because they're talking about how the population of Black people doubled. Okay? Now keep in mind as well, the Puerto Ricans, at the time, I want to say, I don't know if they were counting them as Black, because I do know at one point they all fought for the status of white. So who knows? They could have been counting them in there too. Their status, that census stuff is very, very tricky. It goes on to say, where was I? After African Americans from the East Coast typically went to Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and New York. New York City's Black population more than doubled during these decades, from 152,000 to 328,000. From the middle South, Black residents of Mississippi, from the middle South, Black residents from Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, and Kentucky moved to Chicago and Midwest industrial cities, where car manufacturers and related industries began to employ African Americans. So now the white boy making money up north, he making money down south, taking your land. He making money up north, giving you that bullshit job. And on top of that, they're controlling population with who they want where. Because remember, they're strength in numbers, okay? It goes on to say, it says Detroit's population grew from 41,000 in 1910 to 120,066 in 1920. Damn, that shit tripled in like 10 years. Crap. Arkansas, Louisiana, and Texas went to places like St. Louis in California. That's a fact. The second Great Migration, 1940 to 1970, began in its earnest after the Great Depression and brought at least 5 million people, including many townspeople with urban skills, to the North and West. That's niggas. That's niggas. A combination of both push factors and pull factors played a role in this movement. Despite the end of the Civil War and the passage of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution, ensuring freedom, the right to vote regardless of race, and equal protection under the law, respectively, African Americans were still subjected to intense racial hatred. The rise of the KKK in the immediate aftermath of the Civil War led to increased death threats, violence, and a wave of lynchings, right? Even after the formal dismantling of the Klan in the late 1870s, racially motivated violence continued. According to the researchers at the Tuskegee Institute, there were 3,500 racially motivated lynchings and other murders committed in the South between 1865 and 1900. Again, when we speak about reparations, if you do your genealogy and you possibly find that one of those men hung, lynched in one of those times due to something, you don't know what you can find. Talk about reparations, okay? It's not just one thing, it's everything. It goes on to say, it says, according to the researchers at the Tuskegee Institute, there were 3,500 racially motivated lynchings and other murders committed in the South between 1865 and 1900. For African Americans fleeing this culture of violence, northern and Midwest cities offered an opportunity to escape the dangers of the South. Impoverished Black farmers began moving to southern cities in large numbers after 1910. Okay, and many continued from there to northern cities like Pittsburgh, Detroit, New York, and Chicago. Rural Southern African Americans worked chiefly as sharecroppers, planting and harvesting crops on white landowners' farm for a percentage of the profit, often 50%. I want to pause you right here. Another thing they don't tell you, we spoke about this on this channel in detail. What was happening was a lot of the Black people who were quote unquote working on the white man's land, a lot of those people's land were stolen from them. A lot of them were working to buy their land back, even though the interest rates and the things that they were doing made it grossly impossible for these people to take their land. To give you kind of the cliff notes of what was happening back then, when they instituted this whole homestead and all these taxes with property and all that stuff, the Black people were not notified. By the time they had already racked up bills crazy. The government came in, snatched their land up out their hand, like, bitch, give me that. You see what I'm saying? So our people were losing land every which way but loose. Okay? Like I said, the amount of attacks we were under should be studied, and it's not studied enough. So yes, you'll see old pictures, you'll see old videos of Black folks on white folks' land. A lot of times that's stolen land, and a lot of times some of those Black people are working to buy their lands back. Problem is, there was still slavery all the way up until damn near now, because they were paying them pennies. It goes on to say, it says many sharecroppers ended the year in debt. See, especially after the boll weevil began to move across the South in 1892, decimating cotton crops. You know the government did that. In 1900, nearly half of the Southern farmers did not own land. Now pause. What's the coincidence? All of a sudden, the boll weevil happens and almost everybody lose their crops in 1892. And then coincidentally, everybody go into debt. You don't think, remember I told y'all this weather manipulation stuff been happening long before we could even fathom. Now I'm going in my conspiracy theory bag. I don't find it coincidence that they go through this whole famine and then all of a sudden everybody lose their stuff. I don't find that coincidental, okay? Then it goes on to say, In 1900, nearly half the Southern farmers did not own land, and the majority of them were African American. Under the thumb of white landowners and in constant debt, many of these sharecroppers compared their living and working conditions to slavery because it was slavery. That's exactly what it was. Yes, Tina, it was a reset. COVID was another reset. But we're not ready to have that conversation. We'll talk about that on another day. Yes, it was a reset. Basically, they killed all the crops so that all these farmers could go into debt because their crops won't come in. And then they swooped in and took it. That's it. It's not rocket science. Reparations in the form of land is going to be something big when I get through. Watch. Pull factors. In addition to this push out of the South, African Americans were also pulled to the city factors that attracted them, including the opportunity to earn a wage rather than be tied to a landlord, and the chance to vote, for men at least, ideally with the threat of violence. Although many lacked the funds to move north, factory owners and other businesses that sought cheap labor sometimes provided assistance. Often the men moved first and then sent for their families once they were established in their new life. Who that sound like today? You talking about wealthy, rich, clear people owning these major companies, and they paying pennies to the dollar for the labor. Now, the people who doing the work can't afford to really even be there, and they damn sure can't afford to take care of their families. So what the men do is they do hire the men, and then the men make enough money to send money back home until he can get his family up there. Don't that sound like the immigrants, the illegal immigrants that come from Mexico now? See, although it was messed up, we were the migrants that we see now. That's why they call them the migrants, because migrant is really when you're moving around within your own land. So they were doing us the same way they were doing the doggone immigrants. They just switched it from us. They pulled us out the fields and put them in it. That's it. That's all. They pulled us out the field, put them in it. Okay? Now, it says in 1910, listen to how much went down. In 1910, 90% of African Americans or Black Americans lived in the South. By 1940, around 1.5 million Black Americans had left their homes, and 77% lived in the South. By 1970, only 52% remained in the South. So in 40 years, 40%, according to this, 40% of Black Americans moved from the South and went north or west. They sought relatively safer life away from the lynchings and violence that were concentrated in the Jim Crow South. The Great Migration shaped 20th century America in countless ways, but we're going to try to count some of them in this video. I'm not going to play the video, but 40 years and 40% of our people moved. The Black experience through the Great Migration became an important theme in the artistic movement known first as the New Negro Movement and later as the Harlem Renaissance. Remember, I told y'all Obama got rid of that term Negro. But before it was the Harlem Renaissance, it was known as the New Negro Movement, which would have an erroneous impact on the culture of the era. Based in New York City, this cultural movement produced some of the finest and most influential literature, music, and fashion in the 20th century. The Great Migration also began a new era of increasing political activism among African Americans, who, after being disenfranchised in the South, found a place for themselves in public life in the cities of the North and West. The Civil Rights Movement directly benefited from this activism. Let me say this too. You know who else was benefiting off the Great Migration? Highly weird, because now you got this New Negro Movement or Harlem Renaissance. The majority of that talent, because don't get me wrong, we talented all over America, but this is all simultaneously happening during the Great Migration. So now you're getting all these Southern people moving into New York City, Chicago, and all these places in droves. And now the sounds are changing. The music is changing. Everything is changing because that influence from the South is what's shaping the now culture in the North. As a matter of fact, hip hop are the children of those people. So the kids who created hip hop in the 70s, it was their parents who went up through the Great Migration. Not all, but for the large majority. So culturally, now the powers that be are also they are also benefiting as well, because now you put this new Negro movement on mainstream platforms or on out there where everybody could see it. Now everybody knows we've always been marketable. Now everybody's interested. You get it? So now they making money hand over fist. This reparations thing, we can't stay at slavery. If we stick to slavery when we speak about reparations, we are doing ourselves a gross misjustice. Do you hear me? So now culturally, they profiting. Because all them folks coming in from the South. Okay? That's why Muddy Waters and them, all them up in Detroit, Chicago, most of them folks came from the South. Okay? Now, what was racism like in the North? Racism and lack of formal education relegated most African-American workers to many of the lower-paying, unskilled, or semi-skilled occupations. More than 80% of African-American men work menial jobs in steel mills, mines, construction, and meat packing. Pause. Wasn't the TV reflecting that? What are some shows that was happening in 1970s? Good Times. James either drove a cab, he was over and working in the steel mill. You see what I'm saying? Even Edith and Archie worked in one of the factories, if I'm not mistaken. You see what I'm saying? All of these, they're reflecting what's actually happening during the time. And mind you, these people are not making hella money. Now, they thought that they was going to come up here and make a whole crap ton of money, but this is still new slavery. They not making a crap ton of money. Okay? So, yeah, the new Negro movement also too, the new Negro movement or the Harlem Renaissance, that was a way to advertise our culture to the highest bidder, in my opinion. I believe with the books and all that stuff all combined in one, that Harlem Renaissance, in my opinion, was a way to advertise our culture to the highest bidder on a world stage. I believe that. Because the history says that. It just points to it. It says more than 80% of African-American men work menial jobs in steel mills, mines, constructions, and meatpacking. In the railroad industry, they were often employed as porters or servants. In other businesses, they worked as janitors, waiters, or cooks. African-American women who faced discrimination due to both their race and gender found a few job opportunities in the garment industry or laundries. It says, but were more often employed as maids and domestic servants. Think about Lovecraft Country. Wasn't the old girl's biggest dream in Lovecraft Country down there in Chicago was to work at, was it Macy's? What department store it was? You know what I'm talking about? The big one who was sleeping with the ghost, with the white man, who really was the lady. Her biggest dream was work down at this damn department store. Remember, she was like, oh, they only hire white people. But then it opened up for the job. You remember what I'm saying? So she did all of that. Was it Macy's? She did all of that, turned white, and at the end, she saw the black girl because they opened it up for black girls to work there. You see what I'm telling you, the shit be in the TV. It's just if you don't know what you're looking at, it's going to go over your head. And this is no shade because it's gone over mine of many days. When you start to learn history, it starts to make sense. Okay? Because there was no jobs for these black people who were forced, for the most part, to leave off their lands in the South. Okay? It goes on to say, it says, found a new jobs in garment industries or laundries, but were more often employed as maids and domestic service. Regardless of the status of their jobs, however, African Americans earned higher wages in the North than they did for the same occupants or occupations in the South, and typically found housing to be more available. But this is the caveat. It's no different from today. I could work at AT&T in Atlanta, and they might pay me $85,000 a year. I can go get the exact same job in New York today, and they might pay me $185,000 a year. The difference between, it does look like people in New York and up north make more money. But when the cost of living meets the threshold at which you're getting paid, are you really making more money? So in the South, I don't have to pay you $30 an hour because I own my own home. I own my land. I don't pay rent. You see what I'm saying? So if you stayed at home on the land, it ain't like you got rent to pay or a mortgage. You own your land. So it don't matter if you getting $5 an hour. That's a lot of money to you because you don't have a lot of expenses. Ain't much going on down the South during the time anyway, except a few juke joints. You see what I'm saying? A few 1-2 yin-yings, but it ain't nothing too crazy. So it's the same thing in 2025 that it was then. It's not a flex. And this is no shade. This is why New Yorkers come to Georgia and go make less money, but be so happy to get so much more. You see what I'm saying? Because they make more money up there, but they shell out more. Down here, we don't have to do all that. Down here, I don't have to worry about finding a new apartment every year if I don't want to. I can actually settle down in a home and it's affordable. I don't have to make $50 an hour. I can go get a job at $15 an hour. I'll struggle, but I'll make it. You see what I'm saying? So don't let them flex that, but they were making more money. Yeah, they were shelving out more. However, such economic gains were offset by the higher cost of living in the North Sea, especially in the terms of rent, food, and other essentials. As a result, African Americans often found themselves living in overcrowded, unsanitary conditions, much like the tenement slums in which urban European immigrants had lived at the turn of the century. Meaning, listen, what they saying is, so the niggas got so broke that they ended up living in these small slums. Now, coincidentally, guess what else is about to happen? Now, it's a coincidence that they moving up north. It's a coincidence that the KKK just so happened to be there when they moved. It's a coincidence when they get up there, it's just as racist. It's also a coincidence that I can't get the job that you claim I was going to get. But now on top of that, I'm paying out more money. So I can't even afford to feed my family. So now we got to go what? Poor. I can't even afford to go back home. See, this is a whole nother layer that people don't want to admit. A lot of our people went up there and got stuck. Nigga couldn't afford to come back. Nigga done packed up everything they had. I'm talking about for the ones who purposely went up there looking for these opportunities because it was advertised like, hey, y'all come up here, is lit. Okay? But the ones who went up there looking for those opportunities were gravely mistaken when they got there. A lot of those people were poor. Why do you think on good times James in Florida stayed in that damn 2-bedroom apartment in the projects and James was trying to find a job at the steel mill, driving a cab every time you turn around? That was reality for Black people in that time. That was the reality. Okay? It was something else I was about to say. But simultaneously, guess what's about to happen during all these coincidences? Guess what's about to start popping up? Ghettos, projects. Okay? Right around this time when all the niggas just coincidentally go broke, they about to start putting projects. Boom, 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 boom. Oh, y'all ain't got nowhere to go? Bet. Go over here. You want to live? Yeah, here go a voucher. Go over there. Boom, 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 boom. So now all these poor people that was taken from the South, brought to the North, now these people are worse off than they were when they left the South, and they put them all up in these goddamn ghettos and slums. Coincidence. I'm not saying it's connected. No, it's connected. It's definitely connected. It happened on purpose. Everything that I said happened on purpose. It ain't no coincidence. Okay, so now all these po-ass niggas, and it didn't just happen in the North when it came to the ghettos, because you got to understand, just like gentrification today, it's a systematic thing. It wasn't just happening in the ghettos up north, it was happening in the ghettos in all major cities, because guess what else was happening? If you wasn't forced off the land by KKK and you lived in major cities, guess what else was happening? Gentrification. They were still moving people all across. You see what I'm saying? Black people were moving in and out of cities. They would go into the city, beat up about 60 to 100 years. Then all of a sudden gentrification happened and they move them out. You know what I mean? So it's just so much happening. It's crazy. It's crazy. And I didn't pull them folks up there, and now the folks is broke and poor and can't afford to pay attention. Now, hence, gang violence, pimping, black exploitation, all this. Now we about to really put the dagger in them. Hit them with the entertainment, black exploitation, pimping, all this stuff that took us really down. Drugs, HIV, AIDS, that came in the 80s. What else we had in the 70s? All this stuff is just hitting us. Boom, 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 boom. But somehow we still making it. That's the crazy part. Now, I want to show you guys a video because the thing about this is really, for the most part, about how the KKK influenced the rise of Black Americans. I ain't gonna say influence. How they forced us and ran us up off our lands, okay? Because that's what this is all about. I believe in reparations in all forms. I don't believe just in cash. I believe we are owed cash, but I also believe that we are owed in every single form that they can give it to us, meaning if it's land, I don't care if it's resources, I want it all. I want it all. I'm not too proud to sit up here and say, no, just give me the cash. I understand how it works I understand how to have a successful colony or a successful society. And I know that it takes more than cash, okay? Now, I want to show y'all this video from Forgotten History. And this is about post-Civil War and what was going on with the Klan and how they were moving these people from one place to the next. So this is the Klan and what was going on during civil rights and how everything was going. Y'all get the likes up on the video really quickly.
KKK is deeply rooted in the post-Civil War history of the United States. They are three of the most familiar words and letters in almost any language, synonymous with hatred, intimidation, and murder. What were the origins of the KKK? Why was it created and by who? What have prominent historians stated about the rise and fall of the KKK? How did it evolve and what did that change become? How deeply was the Klan embedded into business, society, and even national politics?
Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, former soldier, Marine Corps Scout Sniper, history professor.
The Klan had three evolutions in its history as it evolved and altered its methods, tactics, and expanded its focus.
Ooh, all three. Really quickly, before I forget to tell you guys this, first of all, I like the video, but I also want to add, you want to know how the Klan was created too? A movie, Birth of a Nation. That created the physical Klan because there were Klanmen in the movie. That's how powerful entertainment is, okay? So Birth of a Nation pops, then all of a sudden, here come the Klan.
Movements have called for the purification of American society, and all are considered far-right extremist organizations. During each period of the Klan's existence, the official membership was secret, and estimates of the total numbers of members was unknown, and they were highly exaggerated by both friends and enemies alike. The first Klan was founded in Pulaski, Tennessee, on December 24, 1865, by 6 former officers of the Confederate Army. They were Frank McCord, Richard Reed, John Lester, John Kennedy, J. Calvin Jones, and James Crow. It started innocuously as a fraternal social club inspired at least in part by the then largely defunct
white Freemasons too. That's what they are. A lot of white it's all connected. White Freemasons though.
Sons of Malta, perceived as an offshoot combined of the old Knights Templar and Teutonic Knights. The KKK adopted many of the initiation rites and formal ceremonies of those previous organizations with the same purpose of fraternity, solidarity, and most of all, political power, which today in hindsight is laughable as well as tragic. The official KKK manual describing these rituals was printed by Laps D. McCord of Pulaski, Tennessee. The Klan also needed a distinguishing uniform, which later in their history would become notorious. Robes, and hence their adopting the Spanish capirote hood. Former Confederate Brigadier General George Gordon for whom Fort Gordon, Georgia was named for, developed the prescript, which supported the superiority of white society and culture and adopted and taught white supremacist beliefs. They created the ranking system, and at the top of the KKK was the Imperial Wizard, or the National President.
I gotta stop it for context because, YouTube. But I want to also add this. Again, I tell you guys all the time, race is a poor man's game. And I say that because when you don't have nothing else, you fight over stuff trivial like that. Like, oh, you white and I'm black. You know what I'm saying? But when you have real shit going on in life, you understand the bigger picture. What they did was use these poor whites to go against the poor blacks. That's all they did. They put the poor whites in the hood to make them anonymous and give them power to not be seen, but still get away with whatever they want. You see what I'm saying? And then what they did was just use them to go against us. They used them to do their dirty work. That's all. So all these people at the bottom of this KKK thing, thinking they just doing something because they really believe in it, don't even realize they being played and being used. You're being used like a toy soldier. They were purposely created right in 1865. Remember, 1865, that's the same year they tell us allegedly Juneteenth popped off in Galveston, Texas. Remember? They say it was 1865. They say we was freed in 1863. 1865, that's where we get the Juneteenth from. Coincidentally, the same year, here come the KKK. So did they free us? Question.
Below this were the Grand Dragons, who governed an individual state called a realm. Then there were the Grand Magis, or deputy commanders. And then the Grand Cyclops, responsible under the Grand Dragons for establishing and maintaining recruitment standards. Below them were the Klingels, who were managed and who were responsible for recruiting and vetting of new members.
And most importantly, too, one more thing. The people at the top who understood why they were doing what they did understood that for the greater picture, economically, this has to be done. I might hate them. I might like them. It does not matter. I understand in the grand scheme of things what all this means. We are slowly but surely siphoning the wealth and economic independence from these people to turn us from the underclass to them being the underclass. Because that's what you're working with. That's the reason why they went in there and burned up to Rosewood and Tulsa and all that stuff. It was to switch us in economic status. The clear people at the top who knew what the scheme was, they were very aware. And they didn't care who felt about it. It was more than your feelings. It was about the grand, larger scheme of things. They knew exactly what they were doing. We were just looking at it like these are hateful, racist people. That's only one little bitty, teeny, beany aspect of it. These were people sent as agents to steal from you, your land, your resources, everything.
The rest of the members were the Klansmen, or the foot soldiers, and enforcers. Confederate General Nathan Bedford Forrest was elected the first Imperial Wizard and stated that he was the Klan's national leader. Forrest was very concerned about the Republican influence growing among the blacks in the South.
Hurt in an accident with an 18-wheeler?
This is how you know it's bigger than what we talking about. He was upset and worried about the influence of the Republicans on blacks in the South. Now, mind you, during this time, for all of you guys who don't know, black people were Republican. Black men could vote, black women couldn't, but either way, we were Republican. Forrest was more than just a person who hated black people. He understood larger grand scheme of things. We can't have them have no power. We got to strip them from everything. So him fearing that they had some stuff going on politically and possibly getting and gaining some power and momentum, he said, hell no, we got to put an end to that.
Despite its apparently well-structured appearance, the Klan had no membership rosters, no named chapters, and no listed local officers. So it was difficult to judge its membership. Due to the heavy response by President Andrew Johnson and the increasing numbers of federal soldiers into the southern states as a result, Forrest called for the Klan to disband in 1869. He stated that it was being perverted from its original honorable and patriotic purposes, becoming injurious instead of subservient to the public peace. Historian Stanley Horn argues that, generally speaking, The Klan's end was more in the form of spotty, slow, and gradual disintegration than a formal and decisive disbandment. Despite Gordon's and Forrest's work, local Klan units never accepted the prescript and continued to operate independently without any form of command and control. Historian George C. Rabel argues that the Klan declined in strength in part because of internal weaknesses, its lack of central organization, and the failure of its leaders to control criminal elements and sadists. More fundamentally, it declined because it failed to achieve its central objective, the overthrow of Republican state governments in the South. Historian Elaine France Parsons describes the membership, quote, lifting
you see how they overthrowing Republican-led governments? That's black. That's black. We spoke about it in length on this channel about the black people who were in power politically in the South.
Fundamentally, it declined because it failed to achieve its central objective, the overthrow of Republican state governments in the South. Historian Elaine France Parsons describes the membership, quote, lifting the Klan mask revealed a chaotic multitude of anti-black vigilante groups, disgruntled poor white farmers, wartime guerrilla bands, displaced Democratic politicians, illegal whiskey distillers, coercive moral reformers, sadists, rapists, white workmen fearful of black competition, employers trying to enforce labor discipline, common thieves, neighbors with decades-old grudges, and even a few freedmen and white Republicans who allied with Democratic whites or had criminal agendas of their own. Indeed, all they had in common, besides being overwhelmingly white, Southern, and Democratic, was that they called themselves, or were called, Klansmen. Another historian, Eric Foner, observed, in effect, the Klan was a military force serving the interests of the Democratic Party, the planter class, and
Remember Malcolm always talks about the Dixiecrats? He said the Dixiecrat is nothing but a Democrat, and he says it's the party of the KKK. So when he said they were like a military, that's exactly what they were. That's exactly what they were. Okay. When he say that some freedmen even joined in the ranks with those dudes, because guess what? We talked about treason. It happens. We not above reproach when it comes to sometimes people being, turncoats. But they were government. This is a government agency you looking at. I don't want, when you think about the KKK, you read about them or you learn anything in the future, don't think about them as the scary white man in the hood who want to hang niggas. That's only the lazy part of who they are. This is a government organization designed to tear down black people economically, politically, socially, and everything else.
All those who desired restoration of white supremacy. Its purposes were political, but political in the broadest sense, or it sought to affect power relations, both public and private, throughout Southern society. It aimed to reverse the interlocking changes sweeping over the South during Reconstruction, to destroy the Republican Party's infrastructure, undermine the Reconstruction state, reestablish control of the black labor force, and restore racial subordination in every aspect of Southern life.
Now, this is the trick. The trick is they want you to believe that they were trying to reel something back in or reestablish the right of the white man being in charge or take back in or reel back. They never had it before that. That's the big caveat. They didn't have it before that. But the enslave you mentally is to make you believe that at one point that they've always had it. That's the whole point. That's the whole okie doke, to make you believe that they've always had it, so you basically not fight it. They never had it. So they didn't retake or get back, none of that, because they didn't have it before.
To that end, they worked to curb the education, economic advancement, voting rights, and right to keep and bear arms of black people. The Klan soon spread into nearly every Southern state.
Do you see all that stuff that they affected on black people? When I tell you this ain't no goddamn hate group, this is a political organization. Look.
Advancement, voting rights, and right to keep and bear arms of black people.
Only us.
The Klan soon spread into nearly every Southern state.
And it's bigger than us just being black, because we are the original owners of the land. When you stealing from somebody, right? You don't want to steal it from them and then go move next door with the stolen items. You want to get as far away as possible. They've been stealing from us.
Launching a reign of terror against Republican leaders, both black.
Hey everyone, we're having our biggest sale.
My bad, y'all.
And white. Those political leaders assassinated during the campaign included Arkansas Congressman James M. Hines, 3 members of the South Carolina legislature, and several men who served in constitutional conventions. The Klan primarily focused upon suppressing black voters, and a political campaign often turned deadly. More than 2,000 people were killed, wounded, or otherwise injured in Louisiana in the few weeks leading up to the presidential election of November 1868. One example was in St. Landry Parish, which had a registered Republican majority of 1,071. The Klan's efforts proved effective because after the murders, no Republicans voted in the fall elections.
So in St. Landry, Louisiana, they're saying before the Klan, there were 1,071 Republicans. Remember, during this time, Republicans, see, they won't say black people because it's too harsh, it's too real, it's too true. So if there were 1,071 Republicans or black people prior to the KKK, and then after the KKK, there was 0. Do you see what's happening here? Do you see why I say that they are a political organization to target us in every single way possible? Remember, this is the time they're stripping us of everything. Political seats. We got wars happening in Louisiana behind politics in New Orleans. It's crazy at this time. They pulling us out of politics. They pulling us out of all our high tops, all our high seats. They pulling us out. Yup, they still doing this to this day. You ain't lying.
White Democrats cast the full vote of the parish for General Ulysses S. Grant's opponent, Democrat Horatio Seymour. The KKK also killed and wounded more than 200 black Republicans, hunting and chasing them down. In the governor's race in Columbia County, Georgia, 1,222 votes were cast for Republican Rufus Bullock, so the Klan got involved. By the November presidential election, the Klan's intimidation suppressed the Republican vote, and only one person voted for Grant. As a result, the 1871 Civil Rights Act allowed the president to suspend habeas corpus. This means that the traditional right to be brought before a court or a judge to appeal for bail or challenge an unlawful detention could be suspended, and was in fact suspended by Lincoln during the Civil War. During this period, the Florida Freedmen's Bureau records provided a detailed recounting of Klansmen's beatings and murders of freedmen and their white allies, numbering 150 dead in voting intimidations.
I think this is why freedmen is such a better term for us. They have actual legislation, they have actual written law, government stuff with the terms freedmen or Negro. There's nothing written for black, nothing, nowhere. But we in love with that word.
As a result of these actions, in 1870 and 1871, the federal government passed the Enforcement Acts, which were intended to investigate and prosecute Klan crimes. While racism was a core belief of the Klan, initially anti-Semitism was not. Many prominent Southern Jews identified wholly with Southern culture, resulting in examples of Jewish participation in the Klan until they too were included as targets. The second era of the Klan started in 1915 as a small group in Stone Mountain, Georgia. It expanded membership nationwide in the early and mid-1920s, including urban areas of the Midwest and West, with Kansas being a large Klan stronghold. The various independent Klan organizations often took a position of supporting prohibition and compulsory public education for white children, although blacks were not to be educated if possible, and if they were, only in segregated schools. The Klan received its greatest propaganda boost of its entire history when film director D.W. Griffith released his 1915 silent film, The Birth of a Nation, which took great liberties with the truth surrounding the creation and activities of the first Klan.
Industrious just really had this sensibility when it came to hospitality that suited me. The community managers are so welcoming, so warm.
This was when the Klan was resurrected by William Joseph Simmons in Georgia due to the popularity of the film. Simmons relied on the original founding documents from the original Klan and collected the stories, relying upon the memories of some surviving elders. When the film was shown in Atlanta in December of 1915, Simmons and his new Klansmen paraded to the theater in their robes and pointed hoods, even riding on robed horses, imitating those scenes in the film. In the film, the Klan was represented as white knights of the nation's conscience, protecting white virtue and white women from the ravaging sexually aggressive Negro. The public response was very positive as a result, but the film did not mention lynchings, other murders, and voter intimidation. Within the first 6 months of the association's national recruitment campaign, Klan membership had increased by 85,000 by 1920. By the mid-1920s, the organization's membership ranged from 3 to 8 million members. The Klan also began to become deeply involved in politics, even more so than in the 1860s to 1870s, as they knew that they needed pro-Klan Democratic members in state and federal government to block Republican actions targeting their organization. They needed politicians who would support Jim Crow laws and keep the federal government out of their business.
So, again, a political party, this is the KKK, who were basically using force, intimidation, lynching, raping, all this stuff to get their point across. They would go into towns with heavily black people and force them either kill them, force them out of there. Like the whole job was to be like armed robbers or thieves in the night.
They were described as being the acting military arm of the Democratic Party and were attributed with helping white Democrats regain control of state legislatures throughout the South through voter intimidation and ridiculous literacy and cognitive tests against black voters. In 1923, Simmons was ousted as leader of the KKK by Hiram Wesley Evans. From September 1923, there were 2 Klan organizations, the one founded by Simmons and led by Evans in the southern United States, and a separate group led by Grand Dragon D.C. Stevenson based in Indiana, with its membership primarily in the Midwestern United States. However, despite their rather successful advances into the political arena, public opinion was against the Klan, and membership rapidly declined in the latter half of the 1920s. Infighting from various Klan groups, as well as federal law enforcement opposition, brought about a collapse in the membership of both groups. Membership had dropped to about 30,000 by 1930, and finally faded away in the 1940s. The third incarnation of the Klan was resurrected in the early 1950s in the form of localized and isolated groups that used the KKK brand name locally but had no connected affiliation. They opposed the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s, such as when they fought against Brown versus Board of Education and imposed separate but equal as their justification. During this period, they often infiltrated Southern police departments, schools, and governor's offices, such as George Wallace of Alabama. Several members of the Klan groups had beaten the Freedom Riders in 1961, murdered civil rights workers, such as Medgar Evers, by Klansman Byron Della Beckwith in 1963. Some were convicted of murder in the deaths of civil rights workers in Mississippi in 1964 and of children in the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama in 1963 and killing Viola Liuzzi in 1965. These activities saw the KKK classified as a hate group by the Anti-Defamation League and the Southern Poverty Law Center. The final demise of the original Klan arrived in the form of a senseless murder of 19-year-old black male Michael Donald in 1981 and a trial that made history in Alabama. In 1987, the Klan was successfully sued in federal court in a historic $7 million verdict against the men involved in the lynching of Donald. But Robert K. Byrd, the Democratic leader and longtime senator, was a Klan recruiter in the 1940s. He described the organization as a group of upstanding people, doctors, lawyers, clergy, judges, who he thought could provide an outlet for his talents and ambitions, and also supported his opposition to communism. Byrd claimed to have left the KKK in 1946, but encouraged by the Grand Dragon of his KKK branch, and with Klan money, Byrd ran on the Democratic ticket for both state and federal offices. The Klan funded him throughout his career. Byrd opposed Brown versus Board of Education, supported Jim Crow laws, and separate but equal racial laws. He joined James Strom Thurmond Sr., who also helped him in opposing racial equality laws. Also opposed the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and ran with Klan money.
Do you see how if you listen to what the KKK really did outside of burning churches and burning crosses in people's front lawn, when you peel back the layers of a lot of the things that they were doing behind the scenes, politically, economically, socially, and all that stuff, they was kicking ass. They was kicking our ass. They was kicking our ass. Okay? They was robbing us blind like crazy. They was literally robbing us blind. And we just looking at they racist. We just looking at, oh, they burning our churches. We just looking at, oh, they walking out here in these white hoods. Not realizing the damage they were doing to us all in all. Like, if it was a snake, it would have bit us. Yvonne Cox says Medgar Evers was killed by the NAACP. Don't get me started. And I feel like his brother had something. Oh, let me stop. T. Hames said fear mongering that unsettles institutions is going on today. That's what they did then. That's why when you hear about the KKK and whenever we learned about KKK, all we learned was there was these crazy broke ass white men under these hoods who hated black people, but it was way deeper than that. That was only the surface. Yes, they hated us, but why? Because they wanted to take and steal from us, and that's what they were doing. It was deeper than that. William, thank you for the super chat. Says, thank you for the super sticker. I appreciate you, my love. I appreciate you. Let me let him finish.
Byrd called civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. as a self-seeking rabble-rouser. Both Hillary Clinton and Joseph Biden proudly proclaimed Senator Robert K. Byrd to be their mentor. Buildings still carry Byrd's name in exaltation. The United States government still considers the Klan to be a subversive terrorist organization. Currently, the Anti-Defamation League puts total KKK membership nationwide at around 3,000, while the Southern Poverty Law Center claims 6,000 members in total. The Ku Klux Klan became notoriously immortalized by its actions, origins, and total creation by the Democratic Party, which supported and funded Klan activities to include political and criminal enterprises. Remember this when you hear people claim that Republicans are fascists. The Republicans were hated and targeted by the Klan, and for good reason.
But see how that's out of context? Do you see how that's out of context? You heard what he just said? When you say the Republicans are fascists, remember they were attacked by the Klan. But what he's not mentioning is it wasn't white Republicans that were attacked by the Klan. It was black people who were attacked by the Klan. It wasn't white Republicans. Now, don't get me wrong. White people did get caught up in the mix. They felt like if you want to hang with them niggas, then you can go with them. And they did hang and lynch a bunch of white folks who wanted to help out niggas. But what I'm saying is these people, like, it's so mind-boggling that they show us, and I know why they do it, but they show us one thing, knowing that ain't really what it is, because it's something completely different, like the made you look game. Yeah, loving me, we looking at the surface. That's all we doing is looking at the surface. But these people, he just flipped that. Oh, the KKK used to attack Republicans, but wasn't white. The Republican Party was not a predominantly white party. That's why when the Democrats were created, they fell into the Democratic Party. I mean, that's why when the KKK was created, they fell into the Democratic Party. If there were a lot of white people in the Republican Party, then you would have seen them on both sides. You didn't, because most of the races were in the Democratic Party. Now, they tell us the party switched. I don't believe it. I think the people switched like what was told to me originally. I think the people switched like we're now switching today. Aren't we now collectively picking ourselves? Not me, because I don't vote. But aren't Black Americans collectively picking themselves up, walking away from the Democratic table over to the Republican? I think that's what was happening there. Well, not this particular situation, because they'll end up taking away voting rights. But ultimately, you see what really happened. Those Republicans were Black Americans, and the KKK were attacking those people on all fronts. Social, economically, every which way but loose, running them off their lands. I want to show y'all a little clip of what was kind of going on during the civil rights movement. with the KKK. Hold on. And this is a documentary, so this is kind of like real time. And you wonder why the kids love this and why they smile in the picture when they hanging us and lynching us, because you got to understand, we are still at this war. We are still at war. We are still prisoners of war. That's why Hitler said, you have in your possessions America's precious jewels. We are still to this day prisoners of war. And for warlike people, it runs in their veins. It seeds through their veins. So that's why their kids were smiling in the picture, because it's like a victory. If you know anything about American history, especially American war history, it's a big thing to kill an officer and be able to take his dog tags or his rank or his hat, something to bring back like a trophy. That when you're at war, that's exactly why they took pictures with us hanging in the trees, burnt up on the cars, because it's like the trophy. Hey, I conquered this during the war. All right, hold on.
Crowd kept growing outside Memorial Auditorium in Raleigh, North Carolina. Hundreds of police surrounded the building, intent on maintaining order at what would be the state's largest political gathering of the year. The rally had been called by the United Klans of America as a show of support for Klan leaders being investigated by Congress and the FBI.
You got to keep in mind too, when you under protection back then, you didn't have to hide your face. See, what I believe happened to the KKK right now, they'll say it was dismantled, Cap. I think the KKK went from being out loud and proud to putting their face under the hoods to fading into the Democratic Party to turning into them blue-haired creeps that y'all love. And the black ones too. Because remember, we saw earlier in one of the videos that there were freedmen that was on the side of the KKK as well. Nobody's off limits or exempt. Okay?
The state's head Klansman, Grand Dragon Bob Jones, was facing a possible prison sentence. The future of the Ku Klux Klan itself was on the line.
Jones's dream was really to build the Klan into something that had political legitimacy. He also understood that both the Klan's goals and to some degree its appeal really relied upon its militants as well.
As hecklers began taunting a group of black activists in the balcony, Jones ordered them to stop. "Quit playing with them niggers," he commanded. Bob Jones was the most successful Grand Dragon in the country. In just 3 years, he had grown the North Carolina Klan from a handful of friends to some 10,000 members, more than the clans of all other southern states combined. In the process, Jones had helped give the most progressive state in the South a new nickname: Klansville, USA.
There was really no politicians during the 1960s that were really voicing the concerns of North Carolina's white working class. And especially those people who were really concerned about racial integration.
Tell her you're welcome, Black Diamond.
So who's going to speak for frustrated, poor white folks who see integration as a threat to their job, to their way of life? The Klan becomes the organization that can be the spokesperson for people who perceive their way of life to be under threat.
We had the NAACP. They had the Klan. They had the Klan.
Maturing is realizing the NAACP and the Klan work together, but that's neither here nor there. When you understand why the Klan is here, or what the purpose of the Klan is, do you understand that when they say, "Oh, the people were that their way of lives were threatened," that's a lie. They were poor trash. We just went over poor whites last week. A lot of those white people that's under them hoods is poor white trash. They ain't got shit. So how can their way of life be threatened? Think about it. Now, they did admit that these people felt intimidated by black people because they were being hired more in the workplace, and that caused all types of strifes, right? But when you think about it, what is threatened if around the time you ain't got shit? You ain't got shit as a collective. You don't have shit. Y'all are in the process of taking shit, but as a collective, you really ain't got shit. The average white person roaming around the South ain't got shit. He might have a position of power, but he ain't got shit. So how can you be threatened that someone's going to take something from you that you already don't have? Because words are powerful. If you believe that they've always had it, then you more or less won't fight for it. That's why they use stuff. They say stuff like, oh, they were trying to retake back, or they were trying. No. They never had it. That's why they were so serious. That's why the population of Klan went from a few people to 10,000 in a short period of time. Put yourself in them people's shoes. They coming over here. They want to live good. They want to eat good. So you damn right they band together so they can go against our ass. You see what I'm saying? That's what this is all about. It ain't race is only the extra part of it.
The son of a railroad worker, Bob Jones grew up just outside Salisbury, 40 miles north of Charlotte. The fifth of 8 children, he had dropped out of high school in either the 10th or 11th grade. No one knows for sure. He was discharged from the Navy after refusing to salute a black officer. "I'd salute that uniform all day long," Jones said, "but I won't salute no nigger." For years, he bounced from job to job: awning salesman, bricklayer, lightning rod salesman. He struggled to make a decent living.
Many people probably did refer to him, maybe in front of him, as white trash. And that may well also been part of the bruising that led him to feel as strong racially as he did.
Think about what I just said. I told you they were poor white trash. His daddy worked on the railroad. That paid a lot of money today, but back then it paid decent, but you wasn't rich working off the railroad. You didn't make a shit ton of money working on the railroad. So he come from nothing. And then he go drop out of school, go to the military, get kicked out for not saluting a black officer. He's poor white trash. This is the makeup of the majority of these KKK people. It's only a few people at the top pulling the strings, but the majority of these white folks, the poor white folks, getting used just like they be using us. Just like they be using us. Poor white trash is what he was. That's what they all are. That's what they all were.
What the age of segregation actually promoted was a group of people who essentially found a niche above blacks but below successful whites. Bob Jones represented those North Carolinians.
He would never admit being a racist. He didn't object to Jews. He didn't object to black people, as long as they stayed in their place and away from him and never tried to mingle together with white people.
The Ku Klux Klan originated in the wake of the nation's greatest trauma, the Civil War. In 1865, decommissioned Confederate officers in Pulaski, Tennessee, formed a fraternal social club. They called themselves the Ku Klux Klan, from the Greek word for circle, kuklos.
It was essentially a club where they were going to pull pranks. They started to dress up in very elaborate costumes and go out and try to terrorize freed slaves. They would pose as Confederate officers come back from the dead.
The story goes, they first did it innocently, and then when they saw the reaction of the newly freed slaves who were petrified, the word got around that they were having this effect. And that's when that version of the Klan became increasingly violent.
The reality is that the Klan of Reconstruction spent its time murdering people, throwing people off bridges, hanging them from trees.
When the federal government clamped down in 1871, the Klan dissolved and lay dormant for decades. Then, in 1915, the image of the Ku Klux Klan was seared into the nation's consciousness by the first true blockbuster in American cinema. D.W. Griffith's 3-hour epic, The Birth of a Nation.
All right, I want to fast forward really quickly because we kind of went over a lot of this. But hold on one second. Let me see.
We can grow this business that we've got. We can travel across the state and present this message all over.
Well, good morning again. Welcome to another Country Pal Show featuring Skeeter Bob on the banjo. And of course, being sponsored by the United Klan.
I just saw the interstate, so I want to add that too. On the cusp of civil rights, on the cusp of great migration, now your highways are popping up. So all y'all major cities, after they running these black folks out these major cities, a crap ton of highways are popping up. Miami, New Orleans, Houston, and I'm talking about interstate, all the way, all across. So this is like, bro, the way we've been attacked.
America, Post Office Box 321, Granite Quarry, North Carolina. Peter, what you got to leave?
That fall, Jones threw himself into a massive recruiting campaign. Crisscrossing the state in his old Plymouth, he established local chapters called Klaverns in every corner of North Carolina, signing up hundreds of new members. One of the recruits was a house painter and ordained Baptist minister named George Dorset.
Dorset's dad was a Klansman. When he was 7 years old, his father burned a cross in Dorset's backyard. I mean, I think he wanted to bring his kids into the fold, and he did a good job with Dorset.
Dorset would soon become the Klan's official chaplain, or Imperial Clud, preaching at nearly every rally in the state.
George Dorset is deeply religious and saw becoming a preacher as a way to better himself. He started off with benches and a tent. And then if you're good at it, you want to move up. You want to have a bigger congregation. You want to have a bigger church.
I did not. The KKK is really a military organization. Every military organization have a chaplain corporation, right? Or corpse, or whatever they call it. The KKK had a chaplain, my nigga. If you know anything about military, you have to have a chaplain. A chaplain is like a military preacher. And the purpose of the chaplain is so the people that's going to war, so whenever they go to war, you can mentally be okay with, they can come to you and confess, they can come to you and talk to you. Like, you got to keep them sane enough to fight. That's the purpose of the chaplain. That's the whole purpose of the chaplain in the military. That's why every military has a chaplain. It's to keep them soldiers mentally equipped to keep fighting. That's it. That's all. Nigga, the KKK had a chaplain. I didn't even know that. But it makes sense if they are a military organization. You see what I'm saying? It's literally a military organization.
He becomes a preacher. He becomes a preacher in the Klan. You know, George is always ambitious, I think.
Dorset's powerful sermons complemented Jones' organizational skills. They were a perfect duo, at least in the beginning.
I used to know how to whistle that song. I don't want to play the music, sorry. This thing gonna get copyrighted anyway.
Popular television shows of 1963 was set in North Carolina, in the fictional town of Mayberry.
Boy, you did do all right. Sure, 3 trout and 2 perch. Yeah, together with what me and Opie got, we can have a fine fish fry.
Mayberry itself was a metaphor of what North Carolina had thought of itself for an entire generation.
That ain't me.
North Carolina always saw itself as a network of small communities ruled by the Andy Taylors of the world.
What's going on? What in the world are you all trying to do?
Small town local notables who behaved more like the justice of the peace than the sheriff.
I picked up as a little bitty girl, I may have seen maybe one or two black people in this show in its entirety. They hardly ever put black people in the show.
There's always a peaceful resolution to what could be volatile conflict.
You're congregating unlawfully.
Mayberry is a town that has no racial
They got some right there.
issues. Black people walk around and are part of the community, but they never speak up and disrupt.
You hardly ever
That's
seen
what
them.
North Carolinians saw as the kind of race relations they wanted.
That's what I'm here for.
You're sorted and you're identified, but don't rattle that system.
In the 1960s, however, the world of Mayberry was slipping away. North Carolina had become the shining light of what was called the New South, a region that was growing and moving out of the shadow of its tense racial past. State leaders navigated a middle path through the changing racial landscape. They called it the North Carolina Way.
This was a sense that North Carolina is a place that, through the goodwill of its people, is going to be willing to gradually change and transform its system of race relations. Not that there would be a law passed and the change would have to happen tomorrow.
North Carolina's moderate self-image in terms of race relations is based upon a long sustained effort in the 20th century to be more progressive than the rest of the South. Not to change the basic dynamics of race relations, but to pursue them in a moderate form that isn't particularly confrontational.
Gradual change wasn't acceptable to staunch segregationists or civil rights activists. And as the 1960s...
Remember, I tell y'all all the time, it was kids out there doing the civil rights movement. Remember? Look, I want to show you so you can see.
Gradual.
Remember, I told y'all, I tell y'all all the time on the morning jokes, I be like, when y'all look back at that old footage from the civil rights movement, it was children out there. Remember, I say I always give our ancestors grace because when they came across this civil rights movement shit, they were in high school, middle school, and some college. These were children. Babies running this civil rights shit, okay? When you see the water holes and all that stuff, these are babies. We've gone over documentaries where they were arguing about our babies being bit up. And so if it was so good for black people, why they had to use the babies? And you can see this photo right here. These are literal babies. You can look at them even back then. You can see these are babies. That's how we got bamboozled, through the children. Just anticipate. They didn't know any better. They didn't know any better. I always give the ancestors grace. They were babies. They didn't know.
Change wasn't acceptable to staunch segregationists or civil rights activists. And as the 1960s progressed, blacks intensified their demands for equality.
I remember late at night sometimes at my house, we would be awakened with my father cursing white people out. But that's what he did in his sleep. He had so much bottled up into him that he had gone through and taken. But getting into the 60s, around 64, the civil rights movement, it is now beginning to really rev up. You're seeing more political power. You're seeing blacks pursuing public office. White people are having to say, they're going to run for office. We're going to have a black councilman. You know, that possibility exists.
So in North Carolina, you knew if you were a white citizen who wanted to maintain segregation, you couldn't count on your political leadership. And so the Klan steps in and says, we are the only organization that will support white people in North Carolina. What Bob Jones would be talking about are these people who lived a very traditional way of life in predominantly rural areas that were being left out of this whole discourse about the New South.
They recruit like the military. Don't the military recruit?
In the summer of 1964, Bob Jones held scores of rallies, open to whites only, across North Carolina. People of all ages gathered in cow pastures and cornfields.
For many of these people, it was a family gathering, a source of entertainment, a night out. There would be music playing.
They'd sell hot dogs. They would raffle off ponies. They'd cook a pig. Most rallies might only have 20 Klansmen, but they could have hundreds or thousands of people that were there watching and supporting.
Bob Jones was really a master at framing the Klan as being a lot of things to a lot of people. So for some people, these would be at events like county fairs. Men who might join the Klan would come out with their wives, their kids, their friends. And this was seen as a social event as well as a political event and spectacle.
If you think about you're living in a small town in rural North Carolina and people come up and post flyers, there's going to be a Klan rally down the road here on Friday night. There's going to be a band playing. There's going to be preaching. We're going to rail against Lyndon Johnson. We're going to burn a 60-foot cross. I mean, that's an attraction to people in a small town. There's not that much going on, right?
As darkness fell, the tone of the rallies darkened as well. The band
You already know how it go. They started burning crosses. Look. Collecting money.
A popular hymn, The Old Rugged Cross, announced each rally's dramatic conclusion. The lighting of a wooden cross wrapped in burlap and soaked with gasoline. Bathed in its warm glow, members and supporters shared a sense of holy mission.
Jones was offering a chance to be above somebody else, to be better than somebody else. Nobody else was taking this approach to talking to people.
You got to keep in mind, these white trash, bottom of the barrel whites coming in from Europe. They finally get to America. They got a chance to be of status, to have position, to have control. This is why these white folks didn't mind joining the KKK in droves, because I have an opportunity to have a life that I never would have had I stayed in whatever part of Europe I was in. Okay? So you're damn right. A whole shit ton of them white folks didn't mind putting a hood on. It makes sense. It's survival. I'm coming into this new country. I want to eat good. I want to live good. Them niggas eating and living good. Y'all want to get together and go rob them niggas? Bet, say less. What time we slide? It's human nature. But the purpose of it was to specifically target Black Americans, okay? That was the whole main purpose of it. But remember, this is a military. The Ku Klux Klan, the KKK, is a military and a government agency. So it doesn't only have one job. Like all things, it's multifaceted. As a matter of fact, the KKK even was prejudiced against white European settlers, or as they call them, what's the word they use? They were slum. Let me just show you better than I can tell you. The KKK didn't even like the white folks coming in from Europe. Peep it out. So in Indianapolis, they took a huge part in immigration. Now, mind you, when the KKK started resurfacing after the birth of a nation, Ellis Island is busting wide open. The clears are coming off the boat in droves. Nothing but chicken pox, smallpox, flu, every influenza you can find is all coming with them. Head lice, dogs, everything coming. So it's the influx of these people. Now, mind you, even the whites, because I told you race is a poor man's game. I keep telling y'all, race is a poor man's game. Even the whites were selective on which whites they wanted to go where and come where. So what the KKK did was when they started adding a whole nother wave of whites through the Ellis Island port, they started taking issue with the immigrants, basically saying that them niggas, they trash, they white trash, we don't want them. Okay. And now up in Indianapolis, remember, wherever there's large numbers of Black Americans, that's where the KKK was. Indianapolis, remember I said, what if all the niggas in Indianapolis realized that they were the Indian inside of Indianapolis? Yeah. So now out of Indianapolis, the KKK now have a new sights to set on because remember, it's survival. All of them trash. Everybody fighting for survival. So now they want to beef with the new immigrants. Look at what they said. Let me show you. Because the Plain published their newspaper, The Fiery Cross, for several years in Indianapolis, we know a lot about who joined, what exactly they believed and feared about immigration and race, and what they did to prevent people from certain countries from becoming American. Now, this for the clear people who hiding in the bushes. And that's another thing too. I heard this white man on I can't remember what podcast was, say whites are Native American. That is a lie. That is a lie. As a matter of fact, the majority of whites we see today in America are brand new, first, second generation tops. The ones who was here at the inception of what we know now as America, you know them because they still in power, they still in political power, they still owning it, they still up there. The average white you see running around here, second generation tops. They new whites. They are not Native Americans. When I say Native Americans, meaning native to the land. No, they are not foundation to the Americas. Y'all new whites. As you can see, the old whites didn't want half of y'all up in here. Okay? That's for the clears in the chat. Shout out to the clears. Okay? Now it goes on to say, it says the Fiery Cross served as both an official mouthpiece of the national organization as a source for local Klan news. The Indiana State Library also has a large collection of Klan documents. In conversation, these sources paint a clear picture of Klan benefits and influence on both Indiana and national policy. Okay, in an early KKK handbook called the Klan, the national organization, the national organization suggested 10 questions that must be answered satisfactorily before naturalizing a new member. Okay, it says most of them asked about potential members' allegiance to the U.S. government and Christian principles, with questions such as, do you esteem the United States of America and its institutions above any other government, civil, political, or ecclesiastical in the whole world? Okay. It says now ecclesiastical references in this question to the Roman Catholic Church. I want to scroll down. Look at what it says. In their minds, the white supremacy the Klan valued so dearly was presently under attack. This for the nuclears coming in. Like the earlier Reconstruction Klan, the 1920s Klan viewed African Americans as members of an inferior race. In Indiana, members worried about the mixing of white and black races, especially as young Hoosiers gained access to cars, jazz clubs, and Hollywood movies. Basically, our swag was turned up and the white hoes was on it. In 1922, the Fiery Cross blamed jazz for inflaming the animal passions of romance-seeking youth. In 1924, the paper declared that at this time, the whole civilized structure is being threatened by the mixing of black and white races. Okay, hold on. Where's my cursor at? Damn it, where is that? I want to scroll down and show you what they said about the whites. Look at the photo that this is what they posted in their paper. This is not a dumping ground. Signed, Uncle Sam. Now read at what's on these barrels. Trash. Europe. Now these are supposed to be the white folks, right? This is Uncle Sam, and this is the sign. This is what they trying to say that the America at the time was trying to bring into America. Let's get into. And these are white folks now. It says trash, Europe. What this is? Cast-offs. I can't see that. Undesirables, rubbish. This is what they were thinking about the new whites coming in through Ellis Island at the resurgence of the KKK. So white people don't necessarily like white people neither. It's about status. Race is a poor man's game. And I want to scroll down really quickly. It goes on to say, throughout Klan literature, any reference to Christian virtue or protest or Protestant values should be understood as being imbued with white supremacy. The Klan believed that God valued people of Anglo-Saxon, German, and Scandinavian descent more than any other people of backgrounds, right? And they believed that it was their sacred duty to protect white dominance in the U.S. For the Midwestern Klan, the main obstacle to this goal was not African Americans. Many Indiana towns had small numbers of black residents, and there were plenty of institutionalized practices and laws in place by the 1920s to suppress the African Americans. The Klan helped to keep these standards as practice. However, they saw immigrants, mainly Catholics, but also Jews, as the main threat to a white Protestant America. D.C. Stevenson, the recently appointed Grand Dragon of the Indiana KKK, clearly laid out the organization's stance on immigration in a September 1923 speech to Hoosier coal miners. It says, the fiery cross printed Stevenson's address in its entirety under the headline, Immigration is Purling in America. First, he distinguished between old and new immigrants. Hello, they delineated. He was delineating. He said, we the old whites, them the new whites. The whites were delineating. He delineated. He said, we different. We not the same. Then he goes on to say, he says, first he distinguished between old and new immigrants. The old immigrants were Anglo-Saxon, German, and Scandinavian, progenitors of the Republic of America, who brought their strong work ethic and social, moral, and civic ideals to the new land. Omitting any mention of native peoples or the contributions of the many other immigrant groups who helped found the United States, Stevenson continued to provide the history of an imagined past created solely by and for white people. So unless you were white Anglo-Saxon, German, you were deemed not good enough. It says, second, Stevenson plainly identified the enemy of white Protestant America as the new immigrants who were arriving in greater numbers than the old immigrants. These new immigrants were from the races of Southern and Eastern Europe. So remember I told y'all I was talking to my coworker one day and I randomly asked her, what part of Europe you from? And it caught her off guard. She was like, huh? What? What part of Europe you from? And she was like, I said, your mommy and your daddy, your grandparents, what part of Europe they from? Oh, we're like Polish. She from Jersey. We're like Polish, a little Italian, a little, and I let her give off the list. I said, oh, y'all was the white trash. And she looked at me. I said, yeah, they treated y'all like trash. Y'all was the white trash, right? And she was perplexed because it's not like I was saying anything wrong. I was right. But you got to keep in mind, this is prior to them getting a white status. So I get it. Italians became racist toward blacks later, but before, y'all were the white trash. As you can see, even in the article, if you didn't come from Scandinavia, Germany, or Anglo-Saxon white, you were white trash. They just got their white status. Okay? It goes on to say, hold on. It goes on to say, these new immigrants were from the races of Southern and Eastern Europe. Third, he cited the various ways the new immigrants has been shown to be much inferior to the old type and to the Native American stock. By Native Americans, Stevenson meant white European people who immigrated in previous generations, not the Native Indians people who were originally called North America home. So, okay. So what he's saying is, us whites who came here first, we are native to the land. You new whites coming in late 1800s, early 1900s, y'all are not natives. Y'all are immigrants. That's what they saying. If your forefathers, if you don't have ties back to the land, you know how FBA do? What the whites were doing was delineating. If you was white and you didn't have ties back to the foundation of the country, you were an immigrant. And less than. It goes on to say, European people who immigrated white people who, it says, using examples based in the later discredited pseudoscience of eugenics, Stevenson furthered his argument about the inherent inferiority of the new immigrants. Eugenics assumed that some traits like mental illness or poverty could be prevented by limited reproduction of people demonstrating such traits in order to breed a better race of humans. Oh, that's another unpopular opinion about eugenics. They wanted to kill niggas and poor whites. The eugenics movement, Walter Plecker, all them, they wanted poor whites and niggas gone. It wasn't just niggas. Yeah, they wanted niggas gone first, but they also want the poor whites gone too. Just so you know. For Klan leaders, however, the language of eugenics gave them scientific facts to present as evidence for the need for blocking immigration. In his speech, Stevenson presented reports from eugenics claiming that the new immigrants were less intelligent and more prone to mental disorders and criminal tendencies. See, look at how they're criminalizing the new immigrants. They say they were less intelligent and more prone to mental disorders and criminal tendencies. Stevenson cited a report by influential eugenics Harry H. Laughlin, who was essential in shaping both eugenics legislation and immigration restrictions. It says Stevenson used Laughlin's elaborate statistics throughout his speech, claiming, in reference to feeble-mindedness, insanity, crime, epilepsy, tuberculosis, and deformity, the older immigrant stocks are vastly sounder than the recent. Damn. He said, y'all some inbreds. This white man over the KKK is saying the new immigrants is a bunch of low-life, trailer trash, white trash inbreds. That's what he's saying. I didn't say it. This is what the KKK man said. Okay? Now, remind you, as time goes by, they'll get their white status. It says, and the countries which ran lowest in crimes are those which have contributed most to the elementary foundation of the population of the United States, such as Great Britain, Scandinavia, Ireland, Germany, and the Netherlands. Those immigration groups that run high in crime are from countries of Southern and Eastern Europe. The conclusion he intended his listeners to draw from such reports was that these people must be excluded from the country. Stevenson stated, my friends, the significant and authoritative statements like these can hardly be overestimated. Unrestricted immigration would appear to result in a gradual contraction of our Native American stock. So, what did we learn here today, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls? First and foremost, Black America shouldn't feel no way about delineating. The white folks did it. Ain't nobody said nothing when the cracker did it. They delineated. They did. Nobody opened their mouth. I didn't even know they delineated. I mean, I know that they thought they were different, but I didn't know they delineated. They basically said that new wave of whites, we ain't got nothing to do with that. White trash, put them in the ghettos and the slums. We don't give a damn what you do. But we ain't mixing with them, and we don't want nothing. They didn't even mix with them people. They didn't even mix with them people. And that's other whites. Because it's not only at this level in life, we think that skin color is actual currency. It is currency to an extent, but it only works at the very bottom of the bottom. That's the only place it works, like flawlessly, at the very bottom of the bottom. where people have nothing else to gain and everything to lose. But the KKK itself, like I said, specifically ran 6 million Black Americans off the land in the South between 1910 and 1970. And you're not going to tell me that we are not owed land, money, houses, all stock, animals, farms. You're not going to tell me we're not owed any of that. Has anybody ever thought about looking up Lake Lanier, the residents of who was down there in Oscarville in Georgia, maybe people who have family from Georgia? Has anybody ever thought about looking up the people who were in that town to see if you possibly have lineage there, or at least doing your genealogy to see if something lead to one of these crazy things? Because it would be so odd to learn about something your whole life, all to realize that's your bloodline. Because what people don't realize is, because we've been so separated from this history, we don't think it's possible for it to be so close to us. But we don't know if we don't do genealogy. You see what I'm saying? So with that being said, it's very highly likely and possible that a lot of these things we learned about is directly tied to our lineages. Like, we got family and friends and all this stuff who participated in a lot of this stuff. But the KKK was allegedly a government military organization used to take 6 million Black people off their lands, steal all their political power, move them out of their political seats. Many, many wars happened in many, many cities behind political power. People died. People did not make it, because there were white people coming in and literally running these Black people out of all of their positions, all of their lands, killing them and everything else. Reparations does not only come from slavery. We are still owed reparations for what they doing us today, let alone what happened 100 years ago. You see what I'm saying? When you start looking at this history the way that it really is, you start to realize they sold you a pipe dream. They made this shit very whimsical, very fantasy oriented, so you won't peel back the layers of it. Even if it's to scare you, even if it's to give you horror stories about being hung during slavery. Either way, however we can romanticize it to get you emotionally involved to where you don't think. That's what this is all about. When you peel back the layers, it's really black and white. It's a lot of white folks that done did a lot of things to niggas. You see what I'm saying? And they were paid, orchestrated, and positioned by the so-called powers that be, the government. You feel what I'm saying? Cosmic Sun Soul says, hey, y'all. Hey, boo. Hey, boo. Carol Foster. Uh-oh, we got another one making it rain. I make it rain. I make it rain. I make it rain on them hoes. I make it rain. I make it rain on them hoes. Carol Foster says, hey, boo. My great-grandmother and father came to Brooklyn, New York to stay in military housing, which was the projects from Charleston, South Carolina in the early 1900s. And they were listed as mulatto. My DNA report says I am 8% Asian. Sons could be Indian. So let me say this. You said, where did you see mulatto? In the early, they were listed as mulatto. Okay. If it was a census, if it was something other than something that they would have filled out, we have to keep in mind that back then you were identified in giving your identity, same way they do us now. So back then, the census enumerators went and told the people what they thought you were. So if you were light-skinned, they assumed you were mixed. They said you were mulatto. But what they don't know is Black Americans can be two black-ass niggas and make a light-skinned ass baby. We don't have to mix to make different variations of shades of black. So just because you see mulatto, I know it might, some people might even see white. You could have had a great-great-grandparent who were white passing, but were really black. It was all on the perception of who was looking at the person. So don't let it deter you. Don't let it get you, just go with the flow. And the more you uncover, the more you're going to start seeing and putting the pieces together. I promise you. You're going to start putting the pieces together. I promise you. But that's a good thing, though. Congratulations. Congratulations. You got to be careful, though, because they very good with words and how they did it. William, thank you for the super sticker, my love. Thank you, beautiful. Deserving one, thank you for the super sticker. Symphony, thank you for the super chat. Says my adopted male family, because I'm adopted for real. I know secrets while being undercover my whole life. Wow. You grew up with clears? How was that? I couldn't imagine. I remember I went by this clear girl one time when I was young, and when I went in their house, it smelled like, I know what it smelled like. I'm trying to think of what it smelled like. It smelled like white skin. I can't explain it. Yeah, I don't. You grew up with them? Oh, Lord. Jesus, bless your heart. Yeah. Thank you for the super chat. She says, I mentioned it earlier, but the Chicago fire. Okay, gotcha. Thank you, boo. Appreciate you. MOB, thank you for being a member for 14 months. Hey, Corn. Hey, Acorn. Hey, boo. Been busy. We moved out of the city. I'm surrounded by dirt and trees now. The wife and baby are fine. Love you. I am so happy for y'all. Y'all moved to the country. Tell the wife and the baby I said hey. Tell my niece or nephew I said hey. Tell the wife all love, respect, and much love to her and you as well. And so congratulations on y'all brand new family. Yeah, I got to get up off of here though, dog. Y'all, I'm about to sit down and relax. I might smoke me some weed or something. My nerves bad. With that being said, y'all, I'm about to get up off of here. I will catch you guys on the next one. Happy Educational Friday. Thank you to everybody for coming up. I didn't think y'all, not that I didn't think y'all would come, but I just appreciate y'all taking time out your day. So I'm about to get up off here. Catch y'all tomorrow. Peace.
Can you hear me now? Oh, let's go. It's your boy Big Chew, the voice of the beat. You know what I want? Blaze up. Come on, Blaze up.
It's the beat for me.
Wow, 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 wow. For your guy, for your B-O-Y. Drop it for your guy, for your B-O-Y. Do it for your guy, for your B-O-Y. Come on, baby, we are. For your boy. For your boy. Also for your boy. Fix it for your boy. Drop it for your, lift it up.
Mr. Carroll, how you give the voodoo doll time to talk? I don't get no fucking time to talk.
Who the voodoo doll is?
The nigga you just had up here.